Hello, my name is Paul Jacobs of PSJ Creations. I'm nature's artist. I like making things that look like they just came out of nature. So I like to do unusual items. So I got this limb and I looked at it because it's kind of unusual and it's got a huge bulge on it and it's twisted. And in order to see what the wood actually looks like, I need to take all of the bark off, which is a little bit of a project. But there were some soft spots in this wood, as I noticed when I was using my chisel, that it took some small little gouges out. But there's a lot of work to be done on this, and it shouldn't be a big deal. Some of the pieces come off better than others, of course. So I get the part that I want of this log. Don't need to take the bark off the entire thing. And I see where the indent is in the log. So I want to use the chainsaw to take out a nice chunk of that, which would be a little bit easier than doing it by hand. I like to be cautious, so I clamp down the log, seeing as I'm working by myself. It's always a good idea to think things through before you just go in and start working on stuff. It'll save you a lot of hassles and pain later on. So I take out that section that I wanted, and then I determine where I'm going to cut the bottom of it. You'll see there's a lot of holes in that wood. Those are all holes from woodpecker, I believe. So I cut off the bottom of it where I want it and clamp it down so I won't hurt myself if it goes flying. And then I measure how much I want to use, and I make it a little bit bigger than what I'm expecting. I don't know if you can see, every once in a while you see a black ant crawling over the wood. Those are carpenter ants. Apparently those are what made the wood hollow and its odd shape. Because as I'm cutting down through here, I notice that there's more ants in there and it's quite hollow. So I start dropping it on the ground, trying to get as many ants out as possible, which is a little comical to watch, I'm sure. But I don't really want to have ants crawling on me when I'm trying to be working with the wood. So after having done that, I bring it back inside and start grinding away a little bit to see how much of a void I have inside of the wood, because I do want to keep as much naturalness of the wood as possible. So I'm figuring if that void is quite large, then it's going to work out perfect for what I'm looking for. So I take my grinding wheel and my Dremel and start grinding out as much of that wood as I can. And I'm going to be putting a light in here, so I need to cut out an area for the light too. And that's all inside, so that's what the Dremel tool is doing right now. Cutting all that out, and it's just a long process. Of course, you see I have a gas mask on because I don't really need to be breathing in all that dust. And I also use the Dremel tool on the outside of the wood because there's a lot of marks on it and bark and other things. I'm going to try to make it look as even as possible and smooth out all the big rough edges and everything. And getting it ready for using the sanding tools. You see the burr on my Dremel tool is quite aggressive, so I don't have to press really hard because I don't want to make big holes in this. You notice it takes a little bit of time to go around the details. I don't want to lose a lot of those details of the wood. I like to keep it as natural as possible. And after that is all smoothed out, I bring it inside and I start placing beetles, using UV resin to place them in there. UV resin looks like regular resin, except when you put it under a UV light, then it hardens within a couple seconds. And I'm making the spider's web out of some filler for pillows. I have to twist them and use a UV resin. And this is what it looks like after I put some of those things in there. Put a little bit of the resin in the bottom of it. This will be a little bit later, but as I finish that up, then I notice I sealed the bottom of it there and sealed the top. And now I am cutting out some plastic paper and gluing that on the front so that I will be able to fill that with resin. And I'm using a glue gun and taking my time, because if there is just a pinhole, then the resin will find it and will leak out. So I'm going to make sure that that is all sealed up, and I don't want to have large bubbles in there. So I will be cutting out the top and mixing the resin and pouring it from the top. Now this resin isn't the type of resin I usually would use for this kind of pour, because there are many different types of resin. And the one that I like to use is a deep pour resin, where I can pour this whole thing maybe in 2 pours without any problems. But with this resin, it's not deep pour, so I have to do it in, I believe, 6 pours, a little bit at a time. And after each pour, then I put it into a pressure pot. And that pressure pot puts about 60 pounds of pressure in there. And what that does is it squashes the bubbles so that most of them are invisible, and it also helps to push that resin into the very dry wood and prevents a lot of bubbles from coming out because of the pressure. And after each one of these pours, I go ahead and put it in that pressure pot. And then when I get near the top of it, and I don't want bubbles to come out in that face there, so I have to make little slits in there so that the air can come out. And now, after being in the pressure pot for several days, I take it out and I finish off the top there with some UV resins, because there was a big bubble up there. And now I'm taking off the plastic and the glue gun glue. And that's a little bit of a project in itself, because I don't want to make big gouges in that wood. I have to take it off as careful as I can. Because like I said, that wood, on some parts of it, is quite soft. But putting so much resin in there and using the pressure pot has really helped to stabilize that wood and to harden it. So there's no worries. And I put that light inside there and ran the wire through the hollow part and then out through the bottom where a branch was. As you can see, the wire sticking out. So that light is in there permanently. And now I'm using the grinding tool, grinding off the top and the bottom and any other big spots I don't like. I don't want any rough spots on here. Now I'm using the sander to start sanding on that resin. And you'll see when I'm sanding, it turns white. You'll see the different parts on there that aren't white because the resin was quite rippled, which made it so you couldn't see through it very well. So I have to sand that all down. And not only am I sanding the resin itself, but I'm sanding all of the wood all around it too. And I start out on the sander with an 80 grit pad, and then I go to 120 grit, and then 180 grit. And I try to do it as aggressive as possible, and you do all my small carving and everything with the 80 grit. Smooth out all the corners and the edges and everything. Because once I get all the wood where I want it, then I'm going to be bringing it inside and doing sanding by hand using water. And that's what I'm doing now. I start out with 180 grit, and I use the 180 grit on the resin and on the wood. And then there I go to 240. And I'll be going through a lot of different grit sizes. Matter of fact, 17 different grit sizes. From 240, I go up to 320, then 360, 400, 500, 600, 800. And this is basically just on the resin itself, not the wood. The wood doesn't need to be sanded this much. Then after 800, I go up to 1,000, and then 1,200, and 1,500. And it's kind of messy, and I ended up sanding part of my fingerprints off because I was wet fingers, and the sandpaper rubbing against it. After 1,500, I go to 2,000, then 2,500, then 3,000, and 5,000. Not quite done yet. And because it's resin, the smallest little scratches you can see, so that's why the grit has to go up so high. After 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, and then I go all the way up to 10,000 grit, which 10,000 grit paper looks like regular paper. It doesn't feel like sandpaper at all. And off camera, after I'm done all this sanding, I of course polish it with a resin polish and a felt pad. And then I finish up some of the bottom and some of the other touch-ups and everything. And then after this, I will show you what it looks like, all finished on the inside and on the outside. I'll put it on the outside, outdoor lighting, of course, first, so you can see what it looks like. You can't see deep inside because it's kind of dark in there, but that's why I put a light in there. And then I finish by giving it a coat of the resin spray. So that also helps to protect the wood from getting dented. You can see the spiders in there, and other bugs. And then I brought it inside the house so that you could see it lit up. And once you are done this section here, then I will show you a little bit closer. There's a spider over here, hold on. One here, the spider web, and there is a bee right there, and a spider in the center. It's kind of hard to focus, there it is. And as you move it around, you can see it a little bit better. Curve of the resin makes it harder to see in video, but your eyes adjust pretty good. You can still see it, right? And then there's a ladybug right there. And down here, it's got some leaves in here. And down here's another beetle. And on the other side, there's a beetle. Getting messed up with that glass. And let me see. Can I focus on this one? And the other spider there. Unfortunately, you got a couple bubbles around him, but and then I have the cord coming out this knob here where a branch was. And, oops, on the bottom, it's It's all sealed. The cord comes out the side, so you don't have to worry about the cord breaking off. And there are LED lights in there. Puck. It has like a dozen lights in there, so they're not gonna burn out anytime soon. But you can see it there. And then this was all hollow. It's all filled with resin. And it's a very odd shape, but I tried to work as much with the actual shape of the tree as I could. And the holes here, these are from woodpeckers. I don't know how much you can see in there, but this is filled with resin also. But this was filled with black carpenter ants, and the whole branch had large holes like this where the woodpeckers would dig the holes in and get all the bugs out. So it took a little while to get the ants to leave their home for me. But that is my spider lamp.